This hour of The Sean Thompson Show is sponsored exclusively by DonleyAuctions.com. Get top dollar for guns and military items. DonleyAuctions.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios.
I love America. I love the Constitution. I love the First Amendment. I want to carry and all else. I love property. And let me tell you something. If you care about your country, I'll read Ludwig von Mises and the 6 lessons of the Austrian Economic School, motherfuckers.
From the streets of Melrose Park to the trading floor of the Merc, he's fought for every dollar he's ever earned. And now, with personal liberty and our system of capitalism under assault in America, he's here to seize back our rights from the government. With a cigar in one hand and a copy of the Declaration of Independence in the other, he's Sean Thompson. And this is the Sean Thompson Show.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag.
When we talk to my next guest, understand when he was taking his CPA as an accountant, he won the Elijah Watt Sells Award, which 3% of accountants win. He's wicked smart. He's the author of 2008, What Really Happened. So when we talk about home prices, I want to get started with this.
Go further toward the Vienna model. We'll have to go beyond the market. We can establish community land trusts to gradually buy up housing on the private market and convert it to community ownership. We can give tenants a right of first refusal to buy out their landlords when buildings go up for sale.
We can take away all the property rights of America if we only implement communism, socialism, or Marxism, whatever you prefer, to destroy the quality of American life. Todd Sheets, author of the book 2008, What Really Happened. How are you?
Sean, I'm doing great. How are you?
Well, it's always aggravating as you watch these idiots. We're gonna implement the Vienna model. Model. Oh, you mean is it different than the Havana model, where we just take the homes and turn everything into a prison island? And the funny thing is, for some reason in the year 2025, people are willing to destroy the formula of freedom and liberty that gave us, as the youngest country, the highest quality of life. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think there's a number of reasons, but I'll start with 2 of them. One is we've had an educational system that has absolutely failed the country and our younger students and young adults for the last, 40, 50 years, where they've been brought up in these models where they are taught that, capitalism is the problem and socialism is the answer. And that's what we see with Mamdani in New York, where a huge percentage of his supporters, are young white college graduate type people. And they're buying into this idea because it's what they've been taught so long. And then the second factor behind that is that when you go down these paths, one failure leads to another. And instead of admitting the prior failures, what always ends up happening is the people that are implementing these failed policies say, well, the fix is we need even more government control or intervention in the system. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now in situations like New York. They've had rent control for so long. They've had socialist policies, tax rates that have driven businesses out of the city. They've got all these kids who went to these expensive colleges and have big government debts as a result of that. They're not getting jobs that enable them to pay for that. They can't afford housing. And so instead of blaming it on the real problems, which were all these government interventions, they're taught to blame it on capitalism, which is part of the failure.
Well, and the other thing is that we have so many people who work very hard, right? And home ownership is what separates so much of the American wealth from all the wealth around the world. Not only are we the country built in property rights, it's still amazing to me that people think that socialism or communism or Marxism is even legal. I've always believed it's absolutely illegal. And when you hear these imbeciles, these children, Mamdani, 33, never worked a day in his fracking life, he literally is talking about usurping property rights of landlords. And I would be outraged if that already hasn't happened under Obama, who made it impossible in the Chicagoland area and really throughout many of the areas to deny Section 8 housing as rent payment. Do you know that, right? That in Chicago, in the state of Illinois, and as president, he made it so that if you're in an urban area or you live near an urban area, you cannot deny government Section 8 as rent as a landlord, or you have massive problems. Throughout Chicago, real estate brokers and the rest of it, it's a way to test other real estate companies. They call them up and say, will you take Section 8 housing? If you say no, you have a problem on your hands. So you've already taken away the principles of home ownership and real estate ownership in our country. So once the citizens, through ignorance or stupidity or self-loathingness, allowed that to happen, is it really that outrageous to think some 33-year-old communist can take away the principles of property ownership in this country?
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, when you have these, escalating failures building on top of themselves, and people are looking for something to blame, they think the system's not working, and what they're getting taught all the way through now, it's all the way down into grade school, but from grade school through college, is that, capitalism is the problem, not the solution. Then this is what people are going to think. The system's failing me. What system is failing you? Capitalism. I need something different. I need socialism. When in reality, it's been creeping socialism that's failed all along. So it's interesting. I wrote in my Substack piece this last week. I was just back up to Iowa. I always go back once a year to see a football game with my buddies that I went to college with at the university there. And I grew up in Cedar Rapids, and I was back in the neighborhoods that I grew up in. And my dad was a probably low, moderate income kind of person. He was a school teacher, a young school teacher, in the 60s and 70s, and a football coach. But they didn't make anything for coaching football in high school at that time. And I walked through the neighborhoods I grew up in. We owned two houses that were on two different streets, but they were only about a block from each other. And what hit me so powerfully this time with all this stuff going on housing was, here I had, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, so we were a single-income family. That income was teachers' wages, a beginning teachers' wages back in the 60s and 70s, and yet they were able to buy nice homes in two neighborhoods where the name partners from the two biggest law firms in the city also lived like a couple blocks away. There were executives at Cargill. One of my best buddies, his dad was a big executive at Cargill. He lived a couple blocks away. The buddy I was back to the football game with, his dad was a lawyer and later a judge in the city. And what hit me was how amazingly affordable the housing markets were at that time. And it made me think, well, what were the key characteristics? Well, the key characteristics was we had very little government intervention in the system. And as a result of that, the markets did this amazing balancing act between interest rates, home prices, and local incomes. And because all those things were balanced out, even people starting off, at the low end of the income ladder, were able to afford decent homes in nice neighborhoods. Well, and we moved away from that model, and then beginning with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and then the Federal Reserve, and that's what's pushed us to the point that we're at now.
Todd, how about the excitement over these two entities of fraud going public again, and we're supposed to celebrate this? These are two entities that exist on financial fraud, as I see it. And no financial reality, and the other side effect of this, and the other side of the coin of what has actually happened. Not only has 85% of the debt been added since Barack Obama took office in the collapse of 2008, but the government's reaction to it has destroyed the buying power of our dollar even more. I started my segment by talking about real estate prices in the Gold Coast of Chicago, and the Loop and the Gold Coast, all these areas where everybody wanted to buy a condo. When you inflationally adjust the money, they're down 27.27% on average. That's not even specificity. I want to play you a cut of the Chicagoland area, the cost of corruption.
This classic three-story brownstone on Chicago's South Side has a connection to one of the legendary comedy teams in movie history. For a number of years in the early 1900s, it was home to the Marx Brothers. Groucho, Chico, Harpo, Zeppo, and Gummo Marx were born and raised in New York. But as their stage careers blossomed, their mother, Minnie Marx, decided to move to Chicago, railroad capital of America, and centrally located to the vaudeville houses in which they performed around the country. In 1912, Minnie bought the home at 4512 South King Drive, then Grand Avenue, for $21,000. The neighborhood was largely populated by Jewish residents of German heritage. While the brothers were often traveling,
$21,000 in 1912, inflationally adjusted. That's $670,000 today. You could buy this house for half of that. I mean, to give you an idea of the destruction of money, of buying power. And by the way, this house sold in 1982 for $22,000. To give you an idea of feudalism around Democrat areas and the cost of this ignoring of actual corruption in a political climate. So when you look at these Democrat enclaves and you see now that things are so bad that it's acceptable in a society of America built on property rights with the highest quality of life for a would-be mayor of arguably the most successful city in the world to say we're going to go to the Vienna communist model and take property. My argument is this. If you are a decent person living in this area, you really don't want to ever be aware of how much this is costing you if you start to inflationally timestamp money, do you?
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, I'm working on a piece for this coming week for the Substack, which is called Gold 4000, which we just passed for the first time in history. And it's called A Canary in the Gold Mine. And it gets back to exactly these issues that, we're talking about here. We were on the gold standard. Gold was basically $20 an ounce, give or take a little bit, from 1800 until the Great Depression of 1930s, when it went to $35 an ounce because Europe broke the gold standard by all the deficit money that they printed for World War I. So then we were basically $35 to $40 an ounce until the early 70s, when all of the deficit spending, forced us off of it, forced Nixon to go off of the.
But 4,000 an ounce is Weimar Republic numbers, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, compared to when you go back and look at that, those earlier periods of time where we go 130 years without any change in the cost of gold per dollars per ounce. There was also, not coincidentally, no inflation, the highest growth rate, and the greatest upward mobility in the history of the world. That was the period of time when, the Marx Brothers were buying that house that you were talking about.
Correct. So let me ask you a question to give the right perspective, and that is this. When we talk about a government shutdown, we're not really talking about politics at this level of insanity of money. We really aren't. And how it's ignored. 85% of the actual debt, when Barack Obama was sworn in, the debt in this country was between $8 and $9 trillion. It's now $38 trillion. It's unbelievable. And all these people on the business channels, they talk about this shutdown as if it's just politics. It's actual math. And if we continue down this road where one politician now the precedent is $9 trillion on the debt. Forget about what you like of Trump, what you don't like. If we continue down that road, how long before it is Weimar Republic? And people in this country have been sequestered from economic realities. When you talk about this Mindamni, he's never lived through a recession. This child, this intellectual dwarf, has never lived through a recession. So what does it look like when $9 trillion on the debt, when your dollar goes negative? Because right now, if you look at value of dollar from gold standard to now, we're between 1 and 3 cents given on what you're buying. What happens when it goes negative? I'm asking because I think, but I don't know. What happens?
Well, I think what's going to happen here, I think this is one of the things I'm writing about this week, is I think this may be the biggest single risk that the Trump administration faces, is that, and you and I talked a couple months ago, we like the idea of keeping the tax cuts in place in the big, beautiful bill. We could not saddle the country with a massive tax increase to tackle the deficit. That would have killed the growth. That is our only way out of this. But at the same time, we both felt like they made a big mistake in not going after the spending side of the equation.
Yeah.
And that those deficits are still sitting there. And now with this government shutdown and the Democrats pushing not to let these what were supposed to be temporary COVID-related expansions of Obamacare roll off, they are trying to add further to the deficit. And I think my reading of it's I don't know. I don't have any inside information here, but I think Trump feels very vulnerable on these issues.
If I'm playing cards, I'm all in.
These healthcare issues.
He's going to fold. The Republicans are going to fold. Book it. I don't think there's a chance they don't. And this is why I'm asking you the question. Because in there, that's what they're trying to hide. Because it hides the fact of what Barack Obama successfully did is destroy the principles of private health care. Destroy it. It is already single payer. It is already single payer and has been for years. And that's what we're really... But nonetheless, it is the single greatest destruction tool of the value of our dollar, ironically, is healthcare, which there's no such thing. There's death maintenance, but not actual health care. And the bulk of the costs go to the lowest living form of Americans around us, not the sick people who are sick genetically. That's a different category. This is the people who are the real costs, not just the illegal aliens, the degenerates. The cost is insane for just one drug addict degenerate over and over again. In Chicago, when somebody gets shot, it's $1 million if there's any damage by the time you're done paying for it. So you can't keep it up, can you?
No, I mean, and this is where I think, I'm talking about the canary in the gold mine is if they do not get the spending under control and the Fed does what Federal Reserves and central banks have done for the last 400 years, and they resort to printing money and inflation runs up, which is what I think these gold prices are a harbinger of. That is when the chickens are going to come home to roost, because then we're looking at going back to potentially something like the 1970s, where you have runaway inflation, rising interest rates. Rising interest rates will hit asset values, which are stock prices, bond prices, and housing prices, which are the things that a lot of the spending has been based on because of the failure. This continued government failure, which has not allowed the private sector to create real economic growth. So we've had all these manipulative games that have created spending out of these financial assets and housing assets to try and keep the economy propped up. And that's when the chickens could come home to roost. And I think they have got to recognize this and deal with these issues.
This is the opposition to communism's fault. This is the Republicans' fault. They lied about it. They hid it. They're still doing it. I don't care what the business station is. The fact that they talk about these insane inflationary indicators, which is really the destruction of our dollar, as if it's gold made a new high. The S&P made a new high. Bitcoin's $120,000. That is insane. And it's all because of cowardice. And that's why everybody needs to read ToddSheetsWriter.com. Well, that's your website, but the Substack is a fantastic place on wealth and progress. Real progress, not the communist progress, right?
Absolutely. Not the fake artificial progress we've had for the last 25 years.
The progress of communism and slavery, which is how it's been referred to by Democrats who are really mafia members. Todd Sheets, I can't thank you enough for continuing to write about this and talk about it. And it's the perspective everybody needs. Now I just need to get you into Washington. I have a lot of faith in Bessent. Fine, okay. But stop lying about the health care. I mean, just stop it. Tell everybody what it's really done, what it really costs, and who really sucks it up. It's not just the illegal, it's the American degenerate that sucks it up. And you can't commingle with communism. Just ask anybody in Cuba or the former Soviet Union. Todd Sheets, thanks for always making time for me. I appreciate you.
Sean, thanks for having me. I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too. We'll be back with your calls and comments.
Broadcasting from the petri dish of corruption known as the state of Illinois.
In the upper Midwest, the nation, and around the world.
This is the Sean Thompson Show on AM 560. The Answer.
Ben, why are you wearing a lab coat?
I'm conducting a highly sensitive experiment, Arvid.
Here, at Penny Mustard.
Obviously, Nicole.